Alright, so in this video I'm briefly going to talk about minimal APIs, a basic structured setup for, just like a basic beginner friendly sort of project. So here I've got a user model, so it's just got an ID, username and a password. And I've got 4 endpoints here, one for getting all the users in the list up here, which is stored in memory. Obviously, if you're doing this on a larger scale project, you would use a database, but for this, I think this will suffice. But in the users list, we have 3 users: ID1, username John Ligma, password 123, ID2, username Pinger Paul, password hacker blah blah blah, ID3, so on and so forth. So in a GET request, so if you were to send a GET request to someone, it's basically, say, in this poorly drawn picture, you are the client, you send a request to the server. That would obviously, if you're on a bigger project and all that, would have token authentication, and then from there, if you pass the verification step, you go onto the database and it will retrieve. Say if you were trying to retrieve your user information for a profile, for like a Facebook profile or a Twitter, it gets information from the database, sends it back to the server and through to the client. So that's a basic view of what a GET request is. So let's say, as this endpoint is, so /all-users, that will return all of these users in a structured JSON format. So say it will show you, because we're using Swagger, which is just a graphical user interface for like testing your endpoints and documenting them. So say here, if I get all the users, it's going to get all of them in a list, and then each curly bracket is a user. So ID1 is John, password. Obviously, you wouldn't show you the passwords in a GET request for a larger thing, but it's just for testing purposes. Just showing you what they actually do. So it's returning a status code 200, which is just okay. It's just telling you that everything went alright. In the others, we've got a create user endpoint. So I forgot to just tell you as well. An endpoint is basically to say localhost and the port. That's my URL. And if I have a slash and all dash users, this is my endpoint. So that's going to print out the exact same information, but just on the web page itself. A post request is a creating, as it says here, create user. So say again, if you were in like a real world thing like Twitter or Facebook, you create a post or you create a new account, create an event, create a group, create a marketplace post, whatever. This is all posting. So this is this obviously creates a request which goes through the server for authentication and validation, and then stores that information on a database somewhere. But for here, again, it's in memory. So here with a post request, a endpoint is /create-user, and it takes 2 parameters: string username and string password. And then in here, obviously you would have your validation steps here, and if it wasn't validated correctly, it would return a different status code like bad request. But here, so for testing purposes, I just create a new user model, set the user ID to the count of however many users are +1, set the username to the username and the password to password, and I forgot to add it to the users. And anyway, so what we'd return here, instead of just returning the user, which will return a JSON, like we would return this user model like this in a JSON format, I will return results, which is like how, this is where you can return your status codes, dot created. So I think we can pass in later on, if everyone wants me to, I can create like an actual tutorial, like fully unedited raw of like start to finish with a project with validation, caching, all that sorts, with like a SQL database in the background in there. So let's see if I was to create a user. So all users, let's just get the all users again so you can see the changes. So 1, 2, 3. If I come down here to create user, and because I'm using Swagger, it's taken those parameters and it's allowed me to actually use them on this, whereas if I was using Postman, I'd have to put it in as like a query. So here I can just do, I will just do test 1, 2, 3, password test, execute. It's going to return 201, which is status code created. Now if I go back to the get all users and I execute it, you can see that it's been successfully added to the list in the memory. If I restart this, obviously it's not going to keep it in there because it gets set at runtime. If a put request is updating, so say if I was to update my account details or update a Facebook post or a YouTube video description or title or anything to do with updating, you would use a put for a major update and patch for like I think for singular. So if I was just to maybe if I was just to update a YouTube video title or description, I would use patch, I think, but I mostly just use put. But anyway, so slash update dash user is an endpoint, and it takes in a parameter ID, new username. That should actually be new username and new password, but I didn't think of that. I quickly whip this up. So what it goes through here is it tries to get a user model from the users list where the user ID is equal to the input ID first default. And now if I was to return, you could say if user equals null, another status code is results dot not found. Then we can pass in a string user not. Why is this not working? There we go. So that will, if there is no user by that ID, it will return user not found. Else it will set the user's username to the new username and the password to the new password. What's going on here? Delegate request delegate does not take 3 arguments. Something's going on. I think we have to go like this. Return results.ok. There we go. See, as I had it before, was wrong. So it was just returning a user, but it has to return a actual status code. So we'll just go results. We can even do results.accepted. So yeah, we'll just test that out really quickly. So say here, let's go to the users again, and I'll get a user's ID. So say we'll just change Peter Piper. Alright, here we go. So Peter Piper's 3, username will change it to Peter Pooper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll execute that. And we got a 202 accepted. Now if we go up and run this again, oh actually I didn't update it, it has created a new one, so that was a mistake on my part. But if I come up here and I choose a ID that doesn't exist, we're going to get user not found, and that returned a 404. Everyone's pretty familiar with the 404, so I'm just going to get rid of that because that didn't need to be there. And the last one is the delete endpoint. So slash delete dash user is the endpoint, and it takes a parameter of integer ID, and then it just tries to find the user. var user to delete equals users dot first or default, where the user's ID equals the ID that we've passed into. Obviously you would have a check here saying if the user's null, blah blah blah, user not found. We just literally copy that, go like this. What's going on here? Oh yeah, return results dot not found, and then we can, when you delete stuff, it's good practice to return results.no content. So as it said here, it gets the user by the user's ID, and if you haven't seen these queries, it's pretty much, so this doesn't matter what you set it as. This could be I could do like that, and as long as it matches. So pretty much the way I think about it is if I'm looking for a user to delete, so I'm going to say users.first or default, where the U for user, and then we want to get the ID from the user and compare it with something. So the user's ID is equal to the ID we pass in. So right now I'm just going to go through and I will delete. Again, we'll check for reference. There's 3 of them. I'll delete the 3rd one. I will still check. No user found. I'll do the 3rd one. And we got 204 no content. And then we'll come back up here and we only have 2. So that's pretty much the basics of endpoints. I apologize if it wasn't very in-depth. I'm not a very good speaker when talking to no one on a computer, but if you would like a proper in-depth tutorial, like I said, with we can start off with creating like a sports team database or like a movie database, which you can create, read, update and delete movies out of a database, which will have, if you're creating and updating, allow have validation to say that the title can't be empty and this and that. And then we can also implement the Microsoft's basic caching. So caching is pretty much you cache data that is frequently like retrieved but rarely updated. Or so say your user information, you could cache that because you don't actually update your username and your email that often. So you could cache that because then when you cache something, it doesn't have to contact the server. It just can see that the request is already in cache. It will take it back from the cache and save putting load and stress on the server. So that's the basics of caching, and also we've said validation, caching, and we can implement the JSON web token. So that's pretty much for authentication. So you, the user, can only edit your own information. You can't edit someone else's, and you can only create if you've got an authenticated account. But anyway, so I'm just going to end this video off here because yeah, that's pretty much the basics of it. And if there's anything else you'd like to see, and if you want to see a fully in-depth tutorial, then just let me know.